The passage that Gary read, three little bitty vignettes of people complaining. How would you describe that? How would you describe their attitude through those stories? What was it? Poor attitude?
Ungrateful.
Yeah. Ungrateful? Yeah. Pretty normal. Maybe at the Lutz household, I don't know, but they were belly aching. I looked through the thesaurus for all these great words for complaining this week. Is there anything wrong, just in general, about complaining to God? No. Forrest Gump, Lieutenant Dan is up there just yelling at God. The movie The Apostle with Jeffrey Duvall, there's this great scene where he's a preacher and he talks to God all the time, but sometimes he yells at God really loudly. About 2 months ago, I stubbed my toe so hard it just was black and blue for weeks, and I complained to God by name in that particular moment. There's a whole book in the Bible in there called Lamentations, which is a fancy word. You only get it really in the Bible. It's a fancy word for the really honest and desperate groaning about the really big stuff. Not stubbed toes, but life and death, and how is it that life really matters. When you complain about that to God, that's Lamentations. So I want to start this sermon right off with the good news that God has patience and love and wants to hear what's going on in your life, even if you have to yell it. Amen? All right, that's the good news. It's all through the Bible. It's all through the lives of great spiritual leaders. And the thought is that the most important part of complaining is the fact that you're assuming that there's a strength in your relationship that can handle that. Does that make sense? In any good relationship, communication is just key. And you should feel free. You should feel encouraged. In some relationships, you might even feel obligated, if you're totally committed to each other, to share how you feel. That's just part of being in a relationship. Married couples, if you never were to share your feelings with each other at all, what happens? Drift apart. Yeah, you even knew the motion I was going to use in that. If you feel hurt in a relationship, in a tight relationship, and you don't say anything, and you just hold on to it deep, what happens? Stress and resentment and angry drifting apart. Or maybe, whether you've been in a deep relationship or not, maybe you had a really good job. A really good job with a good boss, or great employees, or great coworkers, or whatever that might have been, and you probably weren't told, just shut up and do your job. Probably what makes it a good kind of a job is the culture of collaborative communication. When you can have constructive criticism with each other, maybe even the freedom to tell your boss, this isn't working, and then you fix it. That's called creative tension. And in the long run, when mature people embrace creative tension, it increases the happiness of your working together, increases the effectiveness of your business. So in work, in marriage, in faith, complaining can be good. Except, the problem gets to be, what happens when complaining takes on a negative tone of blaming, or the subtlety of accusation, or constantly whining all the time? Couples, what does it do to your relationship when you're constantly whining or sneaking in little jabs about whose fault this is, or just straight out blaming someone about things? Those discussions turn into arguments, the arguments turn into fights, and the fights turn into, in some level, some kind of a separation. Or when coworkers, when they snipe at each other, you're not going to be as productive as you can be. So maybe complaining, it can be good even, but how you complain really matters. So let me read the same story that Gary just read. I love the story that Gary just read. Very, very direct. They had reasons to complain, and they complained to God and Moses. But this is the same story from a different perspective in the book of Numbers. We rarely ever read Numbers. A lot of you have tried to read the Bible. You get through Genesis, you get through Exodus, and then it's like chewing on cardboard for a while. It's bad. But in Numbers, there are some cool little stories in there if you can find your way there. And this is the same story Gary just read, but from a different perspective. So then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt. And the people of Israel also, they began to complain, showing you somehow that one complaining over here can encourage other complaining over here as though it builds each other up. And they said, "Oh, for some meat," they exclaimed. "We remember the fish that we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers and all the melons and all the leeks and onions and garlic that we wanted. But now our appetite's gone. All we ever see is manna." All we ever see is manna, which on one side is this crusty little stuff, and on the other side, the word manna, do you remember what it means? What is it? The word manna means, what is it? So all they ever see is questions. So what, there is something the same about Gary's story and my story, and that's that the Hebrews are complaining, and then God responds in grace, and then the Hebrews complain, and God responds in grace, and the Hebrews complain, and God responds eventually with grace. And maybe we read this one I just read, the Numbers, maybe we should read it exactly the same. It's just another of the hundreds of times that people complain and God responds with grace. Or that obscure story is one of my favorites in the whole Bible, so I kind of read it a little bit different. Maybe it matters, the tone of it, because it becomes so pointed, becomes so specific, so realistically immature. They're hungry, and they're angry. And I love the verse because the people are so miserable that what they end up complaining about is that they miss cucumbers. Cucumbers! Does anyone here really like cucumbers? Yeah, you got like two and a half, maybe three. Cucumbers are not things you're supposed to like. They're the things that people tell you you're supposed to like yoga or Alfred Lord Tennyson. No one really likes Tennyson, but you think, oh, if I like him, I'm going to seem smarter. No one really likes cucumbers, but you're supposed to eat them, I guess. Which is not in the Bible, but it's Hanson's view of things. When I went to England for university, they took all of the foreign rabble, and then they split us out for a little while into homestays. So it was kind of foreign exchange for little short times. Many of you have had foreign exchange students. We got a week of foreign exchange to acclimate ourselves to the wildness of this new place. Some people went to Wales. Some stayed in inner city London. I went to Cornwall, to this little town called Penzance. Like the Pirates of Penzance, which Frank could probably sing a line for us from the Pirates of Penzance. If you come to book club, he sings something from a musical every week. So that's where I was, and it's kind of subtropical. You don't think of England this way, but way on the back corner, because of the whatever that thing is in the ocean where the warm water comes up, what's it called? Gulf Stream. Thank you. Someone hit it. Yeah. It's actually subtropical, so you get palm trees. You get these beautiful flowers. You have beaches. You can almost swim in these beaches. And from Penzance, there's a long way down you can't see it there, but if you walk all the way down the beach, along the beach, there is a little island. And that little island has a castle with gardens. It's the kind of island where at low tide, you can just walk right across. At high tide, you have to swim back, right? So myself and these other Americans, we decided to take a field trip. The place is called Mount St. Michael's. In England it's called St. Michael's Mount. Some of you have seen the one in France, a little more ostentatious because it's in France, and it's called Mount St. Michael. Same kind of thing, opposite sides of the channel there. So we're going and walking down to that thing, and my British house mother that I was staying with for a week, she was just the most prototypical in your mind, little frumpish British woman who yelled at her 14-year-old son for teaching me the word git, which just kind of means like jerk or something like that. But she was mad at him for that. She packs my lunch, and we start hiking, and we're walking along the sand all morning, and you're kicking in the surf, and a little bit of swimming in there, throwing frisbees, looking for seashells, doing what you do at the beach, but on a field trip, on a mission. And we barely got to the island in time to walk across, so that we could get there. And we looked at the beautiful gardens and the colorful flowers. And before we could swim back, we sat down in the shade. Before we could walk miles back, we wanted to rest and eat lunch. So one girl takes out this Tupperware of leftover curry, a lot of Indian food, and it smelled fantastic. And it was just, I hope my lunch is as good as her lunch. And the other guy brings out this baguette with brie and apples and little tomatoes and all kinds of, just great, with a side of crisps, and it was fantastic. And then I opened up my lunch bag to find 2 pieces of white bread with butter and cucumbers. That's it. It was a cucumber and butter sandwich, and one of them at that. I've been eating like a middle school boy since middle school, so that's not going to fill me up for a long hike and a swim. And it's stupid cucumbers. So I did not complain to my house mother because once in a while I learn how to be nice, but I'm complaining to you about this situation 20 years later. Because of those kind of experiences, when I read the Hebrews complaining about cucumbers, I have this perspective about it because I'm seeing them walking along the sand in the desert, probably alongside the beach to give them some orientation for where they are at times, looking for streams that come in. They probably sit down to eat in whatever shade they can. And what they want is cucumbers in that time, in that place. That's pathetic. That's the thing. They're so miserable. That's what they want. And I get it that you're hungry, but I can't help but picture these people, kind of like the 3-year-old who's so mad because mom cut the sandwich in the wrong direction. Does that ever happen in your family? Just tantrum out of nowhere. Or like in Boulder, when you go to Boulder, there's these... this doesn't happen up here, and even less in Boulder, but when you go to a big city and you're at the green light and you wait half a second to go, let me tell you, how you use your horn determines where you're going at the end of your life. But the thing is about that honking, honking isn't about honking. It's really not even about impatience. All road rage and the drama and frustration that happens in your car is not about those drivers up there or those over there. It's really about the control that you don't have. When you dig down, it's the control you don't have, and you express that with an angry honk. And 3-year-olds, they don't care about how their peanut butter and jelly is cut. What they care about is the attention they deserve, the naps they need. It's always something deeper down. And they express that with a temper tantrum about this surface thing that doesn't really matter much. Married folks, it's kind of like that in your house. The arguments and the complaints, they're not really about who goes to the parent-teacher conference. They're not really about your vacation schedules. They're really the same argument over and over about something much deeper, about who you are and who you are together. And if you haven't figured out what that thing is, if you haven't put your finger on what that thing is that causes the same argument over and over, you're probably going to keep having it over and over, and yet it's going to get more petty. The surface things are going to be toilet seats and new carpets and things like that. The Hebrew people, you see, they were not whining about cucumbers and leeks and grandma's old stew back in Egypt. Deeper down, there was this voice calling up worry. There was a voice calling up these issues of safety, maybe traditions, maybe about the purpose of their life, the plan of their future. Deepest down, in the kind of place where only you can hear it if you are slow and listen carefully. In the secret chambers of their heart, they were terrified about whether they could trust this world and trust their God, or whether the whole world was just cold and short and painful and meaningless. And however frustrating vegetables or bad drivers, when you say to God, I feel powerless, I feel lost, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, I want answers, I want manna, that is called lament. That is some of the most pure prayer that anyone can offer. That is the way to invite something more powerful than you to come deep down and heal the parts that need it most. Hanson, you get all that from cucumbers? Yeah. But it's probably something else, just as random and innocuous in your life. For me, I get most angry when my computer is slow or it doesn't respond to the speed with which I need to type things. If you were to sneak into this building someday when I am trying to update my Google contact list, don't bring the kids with you because it gets real. I get so frustrated at this. And if I may psychoanalyze myself in front of God and all people, I think that impatience when I'm working, really when I get to it, I think it's hubris. I think it is this desperate whisper somewhere in me that keeps telling me, work hard, prove yourself, you're not allowed rest. You are too important to waste a few seconds for a page to load on your computer. And so I act out like a 3-year-old because something deep inside me is telling me that I'm important. And your whispers are probably something different. But what if we could take the time in those moments, those tantrum moments, and say to ourselves with words or with anything, God, give me some calm appreciation of the simple role I play in this grand scheme of things. God, give me trust that your will be done, not mine. And it doesn't have to be spoken. Lament doesn't have to be spoken. St. Francis, he's attributed this great line. It says, preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. And the same goes with prayer. God does not expect us always to pause and construct a sentence. There's something just to be aware of the real source of our complaint. And second, there's something even deeper to respond with honesty that is powerful and pure. That's the way to collaborate with God in the process of your healing. And some of us, our complaints are way more important than computers or what lunch will taste like. There are so many people in this town, maybe in this church, who worry about whether you're going to be able to eat lunch at all, what kind of world your children are going to grow up in. What do we do with this addiction in our lives? Those are important complaints, important concerns, and God hears those. I promise God hears those. And remember, what did God do when the Hebrews complained? He responded with grace, and responded again, and responded again. God's response is not always what we want. It is not always in the time frame we want, but over and over in the Bible and in our lives, God responds to the problems that most gnaw at our soul. So the question is, do you want to complain in a way that splits you away from God? Or do you want to lament in a way that draws God closer to your heart? Do you want to pray about the things in your lives, whether they are simple or heavy? Do you want to pray about the stuff and just leave a period there? Or do you want to dig deeper and bring comfort into your heart with all the big things like fear versus strength, cynicism versus trust, self-loathing versus power, mortality versus meaning? I know we can be a community that does reach deeply with tears and screams and all the things in between. For God to work on the parts of us most closely connected to God's handiwork, what we do is open ourselves to God. Amen.